Oh my heavens, Alabama. Alabama went into Death Valley. I picked them to win. I picked them to cover. I didn't pick them to win 42-13. Thought this would be a competitive football game. Instead, Alabama said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to come out with a game plan that, we don't think LSU's capable of stopping. And guess what? They weren't. For all the defensive improvements LSU has made, they're not there yet. So this is bad in two ways for LSU. Absolutely an outright loser this week in my book. Number one, they lost. Number two, they got blown out. Number three, they were at home. So if you're trying to put together throughout the final few games of the season a 9-3 playoff resume and you're LSU, how's 42-13 going to look against two-loss Alabama? Now, they could still play in the SEC championship game, they being the Crimson Tide, of course, because Jalen Milroe, he figured himself out. Now, on Friday's show, I talked about Jalen Milroe needing to figure out how to play better football. Well, Milro and DeBoer and Nick Sheridan, his offensive coordinator, and the rest of that staff, they went to the drawing board during the bye week, and they came out with this revolutionary idea. What if we run Jalen Milroe a lot, and we just kind of punt on throwing the football? Alabama's leading receiver was not Ryan Williams, it was Jam Miller. He's a running back, for those of you who don't know. Milroe threw for 109 yards. If I told you on Friday Alabama was going to throw for 109 yards, how do you think this game plays out? You'd probably ask, if you were smart, well, what does Garrett Nussmeier do? He throws the ball 42 times, has 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown, under 250 yards passing. That's not a great day. That's not what Nussmeier's been capable of this year. There have been some up and downs, and it was more of a down day here, and the rest of LSU's team couldn't figure it out. Well, you'd say, well, it must be a close game then. It must be. Nope. Bama went for 311. 311 yards on the ground. Jalen Milroe had 185. Well, 72 of them came on a long run. Okay, why don't you take out that 72-yard rush? That's still 11 carries for 113 yards. That's 10 yards a touch. Alabama has figured out, at least for a 1-week sample size, that Jalen Milroe should be allowed to be Jalen Milroe. So I pondered this question coming into this year, and I seriously wondered with Alabama, what's the fit going to be between Jalen Milroe and Kalen DeBoer? If you look at Kalen DeBoer's offenses for the last 3 years, 2 at Washington, 1 at Fresno State, he had a couple of NFL quarterbacks at each of those stops. Michael Penix at Washington, Jake Haener, who's a backup with the Saints, at Fresno State. Go watch those offenses play. Where's the quarterback making plays? From the pocket. He's sitting there slicing and dicing, throwing the ball down the field. Well, Jalen Milroe isn't that sort of guy. And so I wondered, how is this going to work? And we've seen it kind of go back and forth. Milroe hasn't been at his best all the time, but this was him at his best. This was Alabama leaning in to what Jalen Milroe does exceptionally well. And it's a brilliant game plan. We'll see if anyone's got the adjustment. LSU didn't. You heard with Luke Robinson and Matt Moscona on Friday's show from my everydayers out there, who I appreciate very much, that LSU hasn't contained mobile quarterbacks exceptionally well on the ground, and they didn't do that again here. They were even worse somehow than we maybe thought they could be. 185 yards on the ground to Jalen Milroe. Oh boy. Jam Miller, their leading receiver, 5 catches for 50 yards. Don't have to outthink the room. This was just Alabama complete and total domination. They were up 21-6 at the half, and then it got worse in the second half for LSU because it was essentially a repeat of the first half. So rather than the adjustments coming through and the home environment getting into it, all that neck singing didn't do a whole heck of a lot for LSU because Alabama just went in there and absolutely steamrolled. So Bama, one of your big winners of the week. They keep their playoff hopes alive, and might I remind you, Alabama's schedule looks a little something like this. They have, after this week, Mercer, SEC cupcakes, they always come in an opportune moment. Oklahoma, Oklahoma, oh boy. You want to talk about a team with some low vibes? Go to Norman, Oklahoma. They lost to Missouri this week, who's not a good football team. But they were better than Oklahoma today. Better than Oklahoma. And then they host Auburn. So Bama going 10-2, pretty close to a lock in my book. Now, can the Iron Bowl get crazy? Yes, of course. But it's in Tuscaloosa. That's not where it gets crazy. Jordan-Hare is where it gets wild, and Auburn teams play with Alabama teams that have no business in doing so, such as last year, and Bama found a way to win anyway. 4th and 31, Jalen Milroe, he makes those sorts of plays. I feel pretty confident saying Alabama will end the year 10-2, along with everybody else in the SEC, because Georgia has no idea how to play offense. So Georgia loses to Ole Miss 28-10. This was what you'd call a downpour of a game, and Georgia hasn't been able to run the football well this year, which is strange for the Bulldogs. That came back to bite them today because Carson Beck isn't good. I'm not breaking any news or delivering a hot take. I'm just being informative for those who have maybe had a passive following of the SEC this year. Carson Beck is not good. He's capable of being good. You just cannot watch him for the last, month and a half and say, oh, that's a good quarterback. Nope. He is just completely out of it. Completely out of it. 20 of 31, under 200 yards, and another interception. I mean, there's just nothing there. There's no there with Carson Beck. He is an empty vessel at quarterback where you have this hope and promise because of what he has been in the past, and he is just not that guy right now. Which is strange because he's a veteran quarterback. Remember, could have gone to the NFL draft, wanted to come back because this Georgia team can win a national championship, but they lose to a non-Alabama team for the first time since 2020, and the Bulldogs can't run the ball. That Ole Miss defense that has been maligned under Lane Kiffin over the years, boy, they put up a heck of a showing today. They put up a heck of a showing today. So a huge program-altering, potentially, win for Ole Miss. And they've got Florida and Mississippi State on the schedule. That Florida game on the road, they're going to have a bye next week before they go and do that. They could wind up at 10-2. And then Georgia, by the way, don't forget, they could wind up at 10-2 because they've got, wait for it, Tennessee next week. That's at home. I imagine the Bulldogs will be ticked off and they'll win that football game. UMass, SEC cupcakes, always coming a good time. And then Georgia Tech. So, yeah. It's going to be all right as long as they beat Tennessee. Georgia will be 10-2. And then if Texas A&M beats Texas in the last week of the regular season, everybody could be 10-2 and we'll have no idea. I mean, no idea. You talk about a nightmare scenario for Greg Sankey. Does he want to try and sort out who gets to go to the SEC championship game? And then from there, you might have teams that don't want to go to the conference championship game because of the prospect of getting left out of the playoff. I imagine before Sankey sorts through the tiebreakers, he calls the playoff committee and says, hello, yes, I'm Greg Sankey, and you will not leave a 10-3 team out of the playoff. And then you hang up, like Billy Beane in Moneyball. Once you get the answer you're looking for, which in this case would just be an affirmative statement on his part, you just hang up the phone and you end the conversation right there. I imagine that's what he would do. This is the highest of vibes for Ole Miss. They saved their season. Their faith in Lane Kiffin for the moment is restored, and they have got an ability they just showed to play with anybody in college football. Now, they also lost to Kentucky, but if you can play with Georgia, well, who can't you play with? It's not like Georgia sucks. They went to Texas, who was really good today against Florida. They went to Texas, and they were up, 30-0, 26? I don't know. It was a lot of points that they had at the half, and Texas didn't have quite that many. Ole Miss figured this game out. They did enough. That was it. Jackson Dart got a little bit dinged up, and they found a way to win the football game. Really, really impressive stuff from Ole Miss, and Georgia is now on thin ice, just like everybody else in the SEC, it seems, that wants to make the college football playoff. 10-2, you're probably in. You probably should be. 9-3, you best hope and pray.